Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Uh-oh.
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Why did it stop with the pledge?
We just canceled America.
We canceled America. That's very funny, John.
Thank you. Agenda changes and conflicts. Any changes for this evening? Yes, Councilor Willman.
Yeah, I have a conflict on the item number 16. I'm working with the current people who are operating the downtown market to try to get their organizational stuff up to speed. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to engage in that conversation.
Thanks, Charlie. Anybody else? Okay, on to the next item. Citizens appearing before council for items not on the agenda.
Jonathan, we have a list. People signed up.
Okay, who's the first one, Ryan?
Don Gillespie.
Who?
So just for everybody's information, you have 3 minutes. Please give your name, if you live in the community in Glenwood Springs or not, and you get your 3 minutes, sir. You know how this works.
Got it. That's good. Don Gillespie, 3901 Mountain Drive. I'm here for something later on the agenda, but while I was here, I thought I would ask again. A little over a year ago, I was up here and I asked you guys if you had any new water supply studies based on drought and future drought. And also any updates on the traffic situation in town. And as always, you say staff will get back to you. Well, I've never heard anything from staff since. So I have patience. I've waited a year to get an answer, which I've never gotten. So I thought I'd try it again. So if you have anything on the books for the future or present or past that indicates what the supply for water for this town is because of our present drought and the future drought. That's predicted. And also the traffic situation. I know Shelley was on the committees that we were with CDOT back in 2001, 2002, where 2030, if nothing was done to alter the traffic on Grand Avenue, 2030 we'd be at red. And I don't think we've done anything to take away from that problem. And probably should update the data from what we used back then. I'm sure it's changed from that. That's all I'm requesting. I don't want to wait another year. It'd be nice to know what you guys are doing on the water supply with the drought that's has been taking place. Plus, it's predicted to be around for a long time.
So
I'd love to see it, the historical flows of No Name Creek. Because you don't go by what the rights are, because the flows never match the rights.
So Hunter, just real quick on a couple of those things. I think there's going to be a community. I don't know if it's going to be hosted by the Post Independent or CMC, but there's going to be something in the next month that talks about that. So it'd be a community event. Everybody's invited. It's going to be a panel discussion. So I think that'll hopefully answer some of those questions. I think to your other question on traffic, we're in the middle or towards the end of a move study. So I think we had surveys that went out about a year ago. We've had community meetings, online meetings about that. And so that's where some of these recommendations where we've talked about downtown parking, alternative routes, TDM, transportation demand management. So we're in the midst of all of these things. So we don't have an answer right now, but we're in the thick of all these things. And I hope you're not going to be here in a year asking the same question, sir.
I just hope I'm here in a year.
We hope you are too. All right, who's next, Ryan?
Mayor Godis. Next is Gary Vick.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to hold my comments till next week.
Okay.
That is it for scheduled.
Yes, come on up. Yep, you need us. Anybody who needs to come to the podium.
I was on for a specific item, but I'll make them as general.
So Just for clarity, if you make a comment now, this is the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, instead of waiting for that. Okay. My name is Lori Raymond and I do live in Glenwood Springs. And speaking as a member of the Glenwood Springs Citizens for Sensible Development, we thank the thoughtful voters for rejecting the ill-considered 480 Donegan annexation.
Can't hear her.
Is that better?
Maybe if you could speak up as much as possible.
Okay. If the Demos family proceeds with the commercial development already approved by the county, we have no problem with that. But if they or any other landowner would like input from neighbors, we'd welcome that. And the earlier the better. We're grateful for the democratic process that resolved this land use conflict, but we acknowledge it's been a long, exhausting, and expensive process with pain on all sides that might have been avoided by an earlier sincere meeting of the minds. But regardless, we owe great thanks to Ryan Muse, who was unfailingly helpful as we groped our way through the sometimes confusing campaign rules. And we thank the volunteers who processed all those ballots for their long hours and meticulous work. And especially tonight, we want to express our gratitude and appreciation for Councilman Tony Hershey. When others fell short of giving due diligence to the annexation agreement, Tony actually read it and gave careful consideration to its provisions, especially those concerning fire evacuation safety, traffic impacts, and infrastructure, which were blithely swept aside by the mayor and some others. He's taken a longer term and fiscally responsible view of beneficial development. He's been helpful and responsive as we strove to call attention to grave problems that were minimized and even ridiculed by his peers and a media establishment too easily seduced by buzzwords like affordable housing and vague claims like complete safety plan in place and necessary to a revitalized mall to do ordinary fact checking and insist on specific and meaningful commitments. So thank you, Tony, for setting an example of how a public official should respond to constituents with honesty, helpfulness, and willingness to stand up when it counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? All right, seeing none, we'll close public. Oh, sure, David, come on up. Gotta get that hand a little higher.
Yeah, I just walked in, made it in time. Well, I just wanted to, I'm on the steering, serving on behalf on the steering committee. And the last meeting, which was meeting number 4, the steering committee left, I would say, very confused over the origins, might sound strange, but of the origination of traffic on Highway 82. And with concerns about the data that was being presented that I think basically came from CDOT. RAFTA does not attend any working steering committee meetings, and the election has not provided insight in how to approach the West Glenwood annexation and the Glenwood Springs Municipal Airport. I've spoken to Trent about how to approach the Glenwood annexation and the, well, I have not spoken to him about that, excuse me. I've spoken to Trent about the need for RAFTA to be more engaged in the comprehensive planning process. And I have good reason to believe that RAFTA too would like to become more involved. They're not on the committee, but we need them to understand the expectations and the feasibilities of the traffic congestion that we all are aware of. We need RAFTA's input to help explain some things that are empirically sensed and known about that segment of average daily traffic that does not originate in Glenwood, but comes from the I-70 corridor at a single point connection basically, and then is funneled all the way, or is funneled right onto State Highway 82 through downtown, which is their main street, up the valley to Aspen. We have 3 corridors, the Grand Avenue corridor, and I would say the Midland Southbridge corridor. And that has to be thought of, I believe, in the future planning of Glenwood, plus the railroad corridor. Today, Highway 82 is a designated thoroughfare that funnels all this traffic basically from exit 116 onto Main Street. What is the volume of this traffic that is through traffic on the downtown avenue that did not originate in Glenwood, and which Glenwood is clearly not the destination? We don't know for sure. And where we should locate transit stations aligned with high density housing is part of, or should be part of the comprehensive plan. And that will include West Glenwood, which should be connected to a BRT, which is a bus ramp at transit. The train maybe in the future, but we can certainly plan around the bus today. But not many people probably even know what that you can plan. You can plan communities around transit and align your planning with transit, and West Glenwood should be a destination for a BRT transit station. And I guess my time is up.
The internet crashed. That was the problem.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
So just for anybody who's reporting on this in the media, that was David Hauter, Hauter. Okay. Before we had Lori Raymond, and before that, who started us off?
I just want to ask a question. It's really hard to hear back here. You can hear a refrigerator running back here, it sounds like, but it's kind of hard to hear a person talking there back here. I can
Another
hear you
problem.
speak, but I can't hear the speakers speak very well.
Okay.
Some people can't hear them well.
You're gonna have to lean into that
Yeah, you gotta really put it up here.
mic, especially this one. We're working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'll turn it back to council. Sorry. We're on citizens comment.
Oh, I thought we were done with citizens comment.
No, that's what I'm doing right now.
Oh,
We are now going to go to council comments. Okay. Go ahead, Tony.
thank you. They say that you can't fight City Hall. Well, they're wrong. We fought City Hall and we won. The people fought back and you can win. And I want to congratulate everyone from the West Glenwood group and from the entire citizens. I want to congratulate all the people of Glenwood Springs. But only this project was stopped. Only one bad decision was overturned. And 480 Donegan was not the problem. 480 Donegan is the symptom of the problems that are emerging from this council and from this government. A symptom of a broken system and a broken government. So how do we fix it? How? People shouldn't be afraid of their government. The government should be afraid of the people. And I think they might be just a little bit now, but that's going to change. And time is going to go on. And people are going to forget, and we're going to put more things on the ballot, and we're going to have the same issue. If you don't listen to the people, you cannot govern. This is a representative democracy. And during the Donegan thing, I said, I think I quoted Edmund Burke, and I said, you know, a representative doesn't just owe you his diligence and hard work, he owes you his ability to make up his own mind. But sometimes, and he sacrifices that if he sacrifices it to your opinion. You can't just blow with the wind. We live in a representative democracy. Our congresswoman doesn't call me up every day and say, how should I vote? That's not how it works. But if you don't represent the people and you ignore what the people want, you make a mistake. I'm not here to call anyone a liar. This was a hard campaign, but there were falsehoods printed in the newspaper, printed in the Post Non-Independent, and they came from this dais. And that's not right. And what you do is you break the trust that we have with the citizens, and then government doesn't work. I have never seen, and I was on the 8th grade student council at Aspen Middle School. I was treasurer. I have never seen a student council, a board, a commission, a group, an association, a parent teacher committee more out of touch and frankly, not as well led as it could be than this one. Nobody trusts us. And the airport vote on Tuesday and the Demos vote on Tuesday showed that. These are, I think I was telling Mr. These are like Soviet-like numbers, 80%, 60%. That's not what happens in this country anymore. Elections are much closer, but this just shows we're not with the people. And someone mentioned, I think it was Lori, that KD&K story where they said something like, this isn't representative, this is a bunch of NIMBYs. No, it's the people of this community standing up. 2,200 people or more is a lot of people. And when they vote, 40% of the people vote, and 60% and 80% tell us something, we have to listen. We have had in the past few years, and when I was elected, a street attempt tax, which failed, a lodging tax attempt, which we couldn't put on the ballot, an attractions tax attempt that we talked about again today, I couldn't believe it, a water and sewer increase, an airport tax last November that failed, an airport vote that obviously we just had, 480 Donegan, and other issues that I think show that this council is not serving the people. I don't know who we're serving. I'm not accusing anyone on this dais of surging self-interest or making money. Somehow they're not. They're just not listening. I was in this room and the mayor wasn't here for both meetings, but I was in this room and I took notes, and I can show you guys of every single person who spoke. And I listened. And I know people here listen, and I know Mr. Willman behind me listened, and then they made a decision. But when you have a split of 4-3, you have a concern. And here's my concern now, and this is for everyone on this board. We can't go forward now and ask a new street tax question, or ask, we had a housing thing, or ask for housing, because we're divided. And because someone's going to get a petition. When these people out here, and they worked super hard, got 1,000 signatures, Demos election was, or the Donegan election, excuse me, was over. It was over. And that's what's going to happen in the future if we can't do this. We lack credibility. So I just want the council to answer a question for me, and you don't have to do it tonight. But what controversial project, elections have consequences, but what controversial project can we pass from this board 4-3 or 5-2, even one with moderate opposition from the community, that won't be overturned via petition? Because of the actions of a majority on this council, we have lost the ability to govern this community. We have lost the trust of the people, and frankly, I don't know how to get it back. There is one step we can take, and I mean, that's maybe a change of leadership. I'm not asking the mayor, as he asked me in May of 2020, to resign. I think it would be better if he stepped down as mayor, but that's up to him. We do have an election a year from now, when I'll be on the ballot maybe, and when Paula.
Mr. Mayor, may a point of order. We have agreed to a code of conduct, which is that we do not criticize other members of the, as a
I
board.
haven't passed a code of conduct. I thought we had a First Amendment in this country, Mr. Willman, but that's part of the problem. Apparently we don't. I'm done. Thank you.
So the point I was trying to make.
I'm done, Mr. Willman.
I have a point of order. My point of order.
Thank you.
My point of order is, I appreciate Mr. Hershey's comments and his passion and his beliefs, but we agreed as a board not to attack each other individually on this dais. I don't think that's.
I'm not attacking anyone personally. I'm pointing out a political fact.
So
If Senator Hickenlooper says that Joe Biden's doing a bad job and asks him to resign,
this is why you can't
it's
respond.
not bad. I'm allowed to
So-
finish. I paid for this microphone, Mr. Godis, and I'm allowed to finish.
Yeah, but you've already had your council
well,
comments,
I'm
and you
done.
said you were
Thank you.
done.
Well,
So
I'm
I'll
done
hold
'cause
you,
I got
I'll hold you
interrupted.
to your word.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Go ahead, Paula.
I just wanted to give a reference to the River Commission and the work that, Don, that we're doing on the drought. And there is going to be a webinar that the city is doing on, sorry, my phone went blank. I'll tell you. Hold on just a second here. So we're doing a webinar on drought resistance and how we as a community can work on that. And that'll be on May 25th. And I'll make sure to remind everybody again at our next council meeting. But we are thinking these things, our different commissions and boards, and appreciate it, especially in my work world. I know how important this is.
Thanks, Paul. Any other comments?
I think that as a community, we've had a rough couple months. And I know that no one up here has taken the decisions that we made or the recommendations that we made lightly. We have all taken it to heart, and it's been a very difficult and tumultuous last couple months. With all that in mind, the work you did was to stop something from happening. And I think that moving forward, I would encourage you to take that same inertia and appropriate it towards building up this community. You obviously demonstrated how organized and how passionate you all are. Take that same energy and put it towards the best comp plan ever, or creating an advisory board within yourselves to help us. Because we are not going to be a great community if every decision we make, people come together to change it, to retract it, to rescind it. I hear you all. You want to be heard from. You want us to hear you. You want us to acknowledge the things you want for your community. We want that for you too. This is our community. We wouldn't do this. You can look, I make $1,000 a month doing this. You want to know how many calls I got from all of you guys in the last couple months? And I cared enough to hear you. I really do care. And that applies to everyone up here, whether or not you agree with them. So take that energy, take the time, and put it towards something positive, not salacious emails to us telling us how we're failing, but rather help us do better. Because I think we all want Glenwood to be a great community, because I see it filled with really great people. So that's my request. Build it up instead of dragging it down. And because that will show us what we're made of. So thank you all for the energy expended. Now let's move in a positive direction.
Thanks, Eve. Who else? Go ahead, Sean.
I would thank you for your comments, Councillor Wusso, and I'll agree with that wholeheartedly. It's very easy to say no to things. It's much harder to find solutions and say yes to things. We have huge problems to solve. We have traffic issues, we have housing issues, and how do we solve those as a community? So I will agree that everyone up here works for the betterment of the community. We hear different voices, we have different opinions, and I respect the vote that was taken, but we have to understand that 40% of the people voted to keep the annexation, 60 voted not for it. So I think that was definitely a win for the people that were against the annexation, but I'm with Ingrid and the rest of council. Is the decision now is how do we move forward and what do we say yes to? So I had one other comment for staff, and my question is, as we're approaching fire season, are we going to have some public outreach and community meetings around our evacuation plan that we've been working on, and also fire safety for those that live right on that urban wildlife or wild land interface? Thank you. Yes.
We're working to get more campaign signs printed for sure. Gary, we're not necessarily thinking of a public event.
That's what I was saying. Even just neighborhood meetings as this plan comes together, just get the word out there, because we hear over and over and over that people don't hear what we put out there. And so I would love to have a discussion about that. I don't know about the rest of council, but I want people to be aware of the planning that's going on and what that plan is and how they be part of that if we do have an event. So just something I'm interested in.
Can I add to that a bit? Shelley, there's a Roaring Fork pre-fire mitigation collaboration going on right now. And we actually had a meeting today and they were talking about that public awareness, which I agree. I think the city also needs to have that, but
Right.
there is a big push right now to talk about fire safety, because this is wildfire awareness.
We're going
month.
into season.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
So anyways, just to share that that's also happening. So
Mhm.
Anybody else? I'll just say, since I have a captive audience here and I have things to say, that I really appreciate the teachers that are in this room. I appreciate the administration. I appreciate the board members that we have here. I know that the last couple of years have not been easy on certainly my children. And therefore probably not super easy on you, Joel. But I want to thank you guys for getting through that while I have you here to celebrate Mr. Crow. You know, I know that the school board, Natalie Torres is with us this evening, got just raked over the coals regularly as a school board president. And it's not an easy position to be, especially when you're trying to lead the school district and the complexity with the staff, with the teachers, with the parents, and with the students. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for the leadership, Natalie, the administrators on the ground, Joel, and the teachers. I think you all have shown just great courage and fortitude. And I know I'll speak to my daughters specifically. Thank you for it as well. So thank you guys. All right, moving on to the, let's see, consent agenda.
Real quick. Thank God. What's his name?
Ryan Muse.
Ryan
thank
Muse
you,
for running
Tony.
a great election. He worked really hard. He had some great.
Thank you,
training
Ryan.
for the county.
All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Been moved by Counselor Wusso, second by Counselor Stepp. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, now the fun part.
I lost my.
We're gonna have a proclamation for Miss Sandy DeCrow. Come on up.
I lost my-
Okay.
So if you've been a teacher for too long, you don't stand in front of baby audience awkwardly anymore, do you?
Oh, yeah. I'm more comfortable in front of kids.
Okay. All right, this is a proclamation honoring Sandy Nissalantic DeCrow. Whereas Sandy Nissalantic DeCrow is retiring on May 26, 2022, after 31 years of service with the Roaring Fork School District, serving 17 years at Glowing Springs High School and 14 years at Glowing Springs Middle School. And whereas Mr. Crow graduated from Glowing Springs High School, then earned her undergraduate degree from Western Colorado University, before returning to her hometown to begin her teaching career with the Roaring Fork School District. And whereas Mr. Crow has served the youth of Glowing Springs in many ways, including as a school leader at Glowing Springs Middle School, as a physical education and health teacher at Glowing Springs High School, and as a coach for numerous volleyball, basketball, and soccer seasons. And whereas the dedicated service of Mr. Crow has made significant positive impacts on Glowing Springs through her exceptional leadership and guidance for students and families of our city. Therefore, be resolved that I, Jonathan Godes, Mayor of Glowing Springs in the state of Colorado, do hereby recognize and congratulate Sandy DeCrow on her retirement and thank her for her longstanding commitment to the serving of our community. Didn't have to, I just told her on the spot.
Oh,
Does anyone want a picture? Sorry. I'll get out of the way.
I know. we keep talking.
All the staff, thank you so much.
Congratulations. Hey, now that you have a vote for council. You wanna do this? That's a run, don't walk.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Natalie. Yeah, she took off.
Thank you, Mr. Vice.
Yeah.
All right, first item on the agenda is a Historic Preservation Commission appointment. Who is this? Councilor Hershey.
So at this time, I would like to appoint Catherine Proctor to the regular seat on the Historic Preservation Commission with a term that it would expire 2025. I think, Sarah, that's correct, right? Anything else?
I'll second the motion.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you,
awesome.
Mr. Willman.
She's wonderful.
She is great.
She is, yeah.
Been moved by
And
Councilor
historic.
Hershey, seconded by Councilor Willman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, next item, the buddy program presentation.
The what?
Buddy
Oh,
program.
buddy program.
Good evening, and thank you for having me tonight. I am Lindsay LaFaro. I'm the Executive Director of the Buddy Program. The Buddy Program is a youth mentoring organization. We've been serving youth in Aspen for the past 49 years, and in Basalt and Elgin since 1990, and in Carbondale since 2010. We have not been serving youth in Glenwood Springs because Youth Zone had a mentoring program called the PALS program. And when they had to end that within the last 5 to 10 years, they have asked us to come and provide prevention services for youth and families in the Glenwood Springs area. That is not a small step for a small grassroots nonprofit. And so we are in the midst of a campaign to raise funds to get us into Glenwood Springs. And I just wanted to make you all aware of that tonight. We do provide mentoring for youth in a community setting, which is very similar to what most people think of when they think of mentoring a big brother or sister with a younger child out in the community, having fun, doing their own program. But we provide a case manager to walk that family and that youth through that process, as well as coach the big buddy to ensure positive outcomes for all. We also have a program where adults can go into the schools and mentor youth there if that's a better fit. We have high school youth mentoring elementary or middle school youth during early release Wednesday time. And then we also have an outdoor leadership program for teens and preteens. So it is our hope that we will be starting some programming in the fall, August 2023, in alignment with the school year. Like I said, this is not a small step for us. We want to do this well and do it right. And so we are looking for continued leadership from folks in Glenwood Springs who may be interested in getting involved with this effort, as well as funding. We applied to the FAB grant cycle for funding, and we may be coming back to you next year when we have some more momentum with the campaign to help us close a gap should that be there. The youth that we serve are ages 6 to 18. We will also be coming to members of the probably staff at City Council to talk about the opportunities to be involved as mentors. We'll be going to a lot of the civic organizations, a lot of the businesses here. Currently, we're serving about 400 to 450 youth in the Aspen to Carbondale region, as well as in Rifle through our outdoor leadership programs. And we have about 140 big buddies every year that work with us. So thank you for having me tonight, for listening. And if you have any questions, I'd love to make myself available for those.
Hi, Marco. So you don't know this, but I was a big buddy in Aspen.
You know that.
And I had this young man, his name was Yi Chow, and he didn't speak very much English in Aspen, and he was sort of isolated. And I did the best big buddy thing because he was in Vegas with his mom. His dad lived in Aspen, and I drove him from Vegas. And it's a long trip with a kid whose English is but he only wanted chicken McNuggets the whole way back from Vegas. So we have to stop a lot. But I still stay in touch with him now, and his aunt still lives in Aspen, and we chat, and he just graduated college. So it's really a great program. I recommend everybody sign up for it.
Thank you. Thank you for that endorsement. And if I were better prepared, I'd find some pictures of you. On average, our relationships do last just about 3.5 to 4 years, and the national average is 2 years. So we're really proud of that fact. And we know that a lot of our mentors stay in touch with their little buddies long after they graduate and move on in the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. We really appreciate what you guys do. Excited to have you in Glenwood. All right, next item, Habitat. Affordable housing project.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Hannah Clausen, Assistant Director of Community and Economic Development. I'm going to take just a moment to pull up my presentation, which is short, concise, and excellent as usual.
Anything you say so yourself.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
I certainly will.
Thank you.
Okay, So this is for the affordable housing request for proposals. And I detailed this in the staff report, but for everyone present, this is a little bit of the background and the 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears that is before you this evening. A lot of people have worked on this project, as well as the response applicant Habitat for Humanity here in the audience as well. So we date this back to March 5th of 2020 with some city council direction to review city-owned properties to see how feasible they might be for different types of development. And your community development staff worked very hard on that analysis and whittled it down. And through work sessions with our housing commission as well as city council, we got that down to 2 properties, which is the topic of the RFP tonight. And then you guys approved moving forward with a request for a proposal, which Housing Commission then diligently worked on and put out. And that culminated in Habitat for Humanity submitting a response in March of this year, so March 2022, 2 years after it started. We had our project advisory committee team that met and interviewed Habitat for Humanity fairly extensively. I included those questions and answers in your staff report packet. And then we also had a work session with council and Habitat for Humanity discussing their proposal and questions that you guys had. And now we've given you a couple weeks to think on it, and here we are. So just so everyone knows where we're talking about, the 2 properties that are in question for the request for proposal. This is the 8th and Midland property that is proposed for 8 condo units. That's at the corner of 8th and Midland, and it was also appraised in 2021. And the second property is referred to as the Iddings property, which is proposed for 14 townhome units. And this is off of Airport Road, next to the Cardiff Glen neighborhood. And we also had this property appraised in 2021. So Habitat's proposal to the RFP is included in your packet. And you guys had a great work session with them. This is kind of the highlights of what's being proposed there. So Habitat would purchase the 2 parcels for $1 from the city. Permanent deed restrictions on the housing, which is all for sale product. Wanted to make sure I highlight that. Targeting an average of 80% AMI. So that's an average. They have a range of 60 to 100% AMI. And then just a little of the background on what they're proposing on the properties. As I mentioned, the 8th and Midland property, which is just down the way, would be 8 condo units with an average price. And these are estimates subject to change, of course, of $250,000 for a sale price for one of those condos. And on the Iddings, the 14 townhomes, you've got some rough square footages there, and Habitat estimates a sale price of $325,000 for townhomes. This is actually a slide from Habitat for Humanity's proposal, kind of laying out the costs that they would incur to develop these parcels. And I wanted to bring this up just to compare. On the Iddings property, they have average construction costs per home of $475,000. So I just wanted to point out the gap that exists between what they're going to sell for and what they expect the cost to be. So that's a financing gap of about $150,000 for each unit on the townhomes and $113,000 on the condos. And so that's really Habitat for Humanity's bread and butter. That's what they finance. That's how they make these houses affordable, as they close that gap. Very quick market comparison. This was just me going on MLS and pulling some information. It should not be shocking to you, especially you, Ingrid. This is your bread and butter. But these are just listings that have closed and also that are currently listed of the same type of product that Habitat for Humanity is proposing to build on these 2 parcels. And I've included Habitat's estimated sale price for the products over on the right-hand side. So you can see a pretty stark contrast of what they could be bringing for sale affordable housing versus what we have available and has closed in the last couple of years for 3-bedroom, 3-bath townhomes, 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo sale price. Just want to give a quick glimpse there. I outlined a little bit about deed restrictions, and you guys had conversations with Habitat about this at your work session. I know it's a topic of interest, and Habitat for Humanity has a service area that they traditionally serve, the Roaring Fork Valley. And then often when we're talking about city programs, we talk about our service area, which is traditionally city boundaries and sometimes a little bit further. So just wanted to have a quick moment and touch on the fact that deed restrictions, Habitat does work with municipalities and jurisdictions to tailor those if necessary, but they do have a traditional way that they've done it throughout their 25 or 26 years in the valley, that they have a preference that they also voice to you. But that is not a done deal with the decision tonight. That can be negotiated further. So that's why I wanted to call it up. So the other thing I wanted to call out, Habitat in their proposal is requesting fee waivers to be considered as part of these projects, which would be in the process of entitlement. And so I did want to, I heard some questions at the work session. And so I wanted to bring up what the city already does as far as fee waivers. And this is our voluntary deed restriction program, which has been on the books since 2016. And it's waiving all of our system improvement fees. So that's water, sewer, park, school, and emergency services in exchange for a voluntary 30-year period with rental cap restrictions to an average of 100% AMI. So I really wanted to compare what you already waive fees for and what you might waive fees for this project, which is deeper affordability at an average of 80% AMI and deed restrictions in perpetuity. The city does not have a program currently that has perpetuity attached to it.
Can I just explain when you talk about this?
Yes.
When did oh, sorry, thank you. When do we grant these? Just, I know we know as a council, but just for the public, understand when we do these waivers.
Sure, excellent. I can cover that. So the voluntary deed restriction program is for anyone that is building a housing unit that is willing to accept the rental cap price. And then at a building permit application, community development staff works with that applicant and lets them know what the reduction is. And this ranges $18,000 to $22,000 per unit in waived system improvement fees. They sign an agreement. It is voluntary. So with this program, you can exit at any time. So that's another comparison with Habitat's proposal, and why I want to bring up the perpetuity is obviously that's much longer. It's in perpetuity. A lot longer than 30 years. So I just wanted to give you a comparison of what program we already have on the books that you waive all of the fees for. And then this one that's coming in that has a lot more perceived benefit for affordable housing, if you believe in the benefits, that could possibly be reviewed for fee waivers. So put that under your hat. And this is just a slide. I included the entire project advisory committee recommendation. Great committee, and I believe some of them might be here in the audience today, but they selected and they are unanimously recommending that City Council move forward with Habitat for Humanity as a partner on these two parcels. And just their points of the most important things that they wanted noted of why they're making that recommendation. Average home prices in our area have doubled in the past 2 years. Sales data in Glenwood Springs shows an increase of 23% in average sale price for single family homes and 22% for condos from 2020. For sale housing at the 80% area median income, AMI, is truly an important need for the community and was called out in our regional housing study as one of the strongest need areas. Habitat's estimated home sale prices for a 3-bedroom townhome and condo are far, far below market rate, as my small spreadsheet showed. Already covered that one. This is actually a direct quote. It is the community's best hope for a truly affordable for-sale housing project. Habitat for Humanity is committed to net zero housing projects. I know that is important to quite a few people. Habitat for Humanity uses very similar deed restrictions as the Garfield County Housing Authority, allowing possible cooperation in the future. And also those deed restrictions are lender approved, making financing a little bit more simple there. If you have questions on that, I'm certainly going to direct you to Carolyn, our finance guru from Habitat. And finally, Habitat for Humanity offers initial and ongoing capacity building for HOAs. So a great HOA management model is already set up and ready to go. I didn't include this in a slide, but it is in your staff report. this decision tonight, and we have 2 action items for each property. We broke it out so that you can vote on them separately. The action item tonight is not an approval of a development or a design. It is simply your agreement or not to move forward with Habitat, and have our city attorney finalize some agreement paperwork to move forward with these 2 parcels. They would, of course, go through the standard community development planning application process, which Marco and Ingrid, you know very well, being on Planning and Zoning Commission. So I included those planning level thresholds in your staff report to show you where they might end up. It might be Planning and Zoning Authority if they're 8 units and below, could possibly go to City Council. And then we've also thrown out the option there of the city being a partner as the current owner and doing this as a location and extent review process, which is a Planning and Zoning Commission decision. So with that, make sure I got all my items and notes. The 2 action items before you. So the action item 1, request for proposals at 8th and Midland Avenue to move forward with Habitat for Humanity and directing the city attorney to finalize an agreement for the development as proposed. As a reminder, these units support City Council's high priority strategy of creation of diverse and inclusionary housing. And the second action item is the second property on Airport Road with the same recommendation. And with that, I'll open it up back to you guys. We do have Habitat for Humanity's team here. We have some Housing Commission members in person as well as possibly online to answer all the questions your heart could possibly think of. And thank you.
Can I ask a procedural question? Sure. Are you going to permit public comment on this as well? Public question.
I mean, it's not a, I mean, I guess we can do.
I'm just curious. Thank you.
I think we should. Sure.
I think we should too.
One thing I would, it might be worthwhile, Hannah, to describe post this award, the entitlement process, public hearings, all that stuff.
Excellent point. Margot's like, she already did that.
She just did that, yes.
No,
I
I
think
meant to
for-
really clarify what,
for the
because I
public,
know that that's going to be a question to the public. I'm sorry. I just haven't been through a number of these with city-owned property over 25 years.
So the entitlement process that I was describing, different project levels, any development of this kind would come for public hearings before our Planning and Zoning Commission and possibly City Council, depending on where that lands in our community development spreadsheet. So an 8, let's go with actually the 14 unit project that falls into a minor development process, which would include public hearings before Planning and Zoning Commission, and that would be the public's opportunity to also comment on this development. And furthermore, Habitat for Humanity, the way that they process these and showcase, I actually participated in Rifle. They have public charrettes to talk about the processes up front. So that ties into community involvement and gaining community support for the type of product that's going to go there and the design. Habitat for Humanity is uniquely set up to handle that process, and they're quite good at it. But yes, public hearings are going to be a factor of these development opportunities.
And we can, but we do have, I believe under the code, the ability, if council wants to review that, we can call that up. Is that correct?
We do have call-up procedures for Planning and Zoning Commission as well as City Council. So P and Z can call up items between 3 and 8 units, and but that would be staff reviewed. And then City Council also has a similar threshold where if it doesn't quite reach City Council, there's a process where if I believe it's 3, a minimum of 3 counselors want to see that come before and have it be a City Council decided item. We would notify you of the application, and then you'd have the opportunity to do so.
Okay. Questions? Oh, okay.
I read,
Thank
thank you.
Well,
I read a little bit in the write-up in the packet about the deed restrictions and what is this kind of the standard deed restriction for Habitat. And then that some communities do look at further restricting that, say, based on employment or within a certain region, things like that. Can we, depending on what action we decide to take tonight, can we leave that option open to be negotiated as part of the development and process? Or do we need to make that decision at this?
You don't need to make that decision tonight. If you have directional feelings, you can obviously inform staff and council of that so that we can move forward to make that happen in the agreements, but it can always come back as well. Since this is just the very first step in this development process, that can certainly be negotiated, talked about, and decided at a later time, which Habitat has also mentioned.
Okay, thanks.
Paula?
This is actually maybe a question for Habitat, but so I consider that if we pass this, we would be a partner. Has there been any discussion of pulling in other partners if we agree to this and to finish out that funding gap? I'm just curious if there's been any thought to that.
There hasn't been discussions on the city side of additional development partners. Habitat might be able to clarify their partners and who they work with on that financing side, but not from our side of things.
Okay, can Habitat answer that as well? Do you mind?
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you this evening and being able to answer some of the questions directly. And we would very much embrace.
Yeah.
My apologies. Gail Schwartz, President of Habitat.
And Gail, could you be closer to the mic?
Certainly. Gail Schwartz, President of Habitat for Humanity. And again, we would look forward to a collaborative partnership with the city to identify and address the city's priority, council specifically, and associated entities. And our opportunity, as we have just experienced with Basalt Vista, 27 homes. Again, the partnership was with the Roaring Fork School District and Pitkin County. 2 different deed restrictions existed. Roaring Fork School District have their own deed restriction, and it was dependent upon employment. And there was a term, if they were to leave the employment of the school district, that they would also lose the opportunity to live in the home. With respect to the APSHA deed restriction, that is, they qualify at the time of purchase, and that is their home until they no longer live in the community and work in the community. So the deed restriction varies. Certainly the deed restriction in Rifle for those 20 homes will mirror more of Habitat's priorities with regard to having families identified according to their need and financial ability, wherewithal to own a home. And then when they are selected at that time, they would have the capacity to own that home. And then there would not be an ongoing review. And the goal in Rifle is for people that live and work in that community. And there would not be an ongoing monitoring of income levels and as we discussed before, income levels or employment, because we feel they would be contributing members of the community and the benefits associated with living in the community. And hopefully they would remain employed close to where they work, because that stabilizes, again, those businesses and those jobs. So I would look forward to a charrette process that we talked about, where we invited over 100 community members to participate and help us design and visualize what this project could look like, and who we would serve, and what do the units need to feel like, and the parcels, and have the input both from a design standpoint, livability standpoint. And we would envision that same community process, but more importantly, identifying the priorities of the council and the city. What we have done in Rifle is, for example, with the waiving of $100,000 in their fees, one of the homes is allocated to the city to identify someone that works for the city that it would qualify to purchase the home. They've chosen they've chosen to open up to the community and maybe not place a specific individual in a home. But that is one opportunity with the fee waivers we would entertain that same conversation. If the city had someone in one of your departments that you wanted to prioritize, that in that department and police department, fire department, whatever, prioritize someone there that could qualify, that would be in consideration. We have partners, and partners, I will just mention that we have generously been given, we're in discussion, a very wonderful grant from Alpine Bank. And we would envision 1 or 2 homes being allocated to someone employed in Rifle for Alpine Bank for a home in Rifle. So yes, there is, because we have that gap, and that gap is not, that gap is the same gap across the country for Habitat homes, just around or just over $100,000 per home. So we're in the business of losing money. That's why we were, we stepped up, because we are so committed to our mission of providing homes and for residents of the community. And again, with in perpetuity through that deed restriction. We don't see a short term, because it's too hard to do this work, to have the homes flip into the private sector over time. So thank you for the opportunity to address those questions.
Gail, could you address in general the benefits that affordable housing brings to the community, not just the people that become homeowners, but benefits to the community, why it's important to a community to have that?
We obviously having affordable housing, either rental, we know the spectrum of stabilizing individuals in the community. We address at this time, have addressed that one tranche of the ownership sector, because we have local data within our affiliate from Aspen to Parachute, and we have statewide data and national data. What are the benefits of homeownership for a family? And there is a broad spectrum. We're able to provide that in our PowerPoint, but looking at the stability of that family, the economic stability, the stability, the emotional and health stability of the family, and the children and their overall success, the ability for the family to participate and contribute in the community. And again, they're paying taxes, and their kids will be in school, and they'll volunteer. And it is, again, what we feel is, and looking at all of the data, there's been a lot of discussion about equity and wealth building. And I'd like to visit that in particular. When you're in a rental home, oftentimes you'll be paying well in excess of 30% of your income. We cap out the expenditure for the home to purchase it, including the HOA, back into those purchase prices. And as a benefit, these families will earn equity and appreciation. Typically, the appreciation is 3% of the CPI, whichever is lower. So that is building wealth, but wealth is much more than that dollar sign. Wealth is really about the quality of life and the emotional and well-being of the family and the children and their overall success. And we have so much data speaking to, especially when a child has a front door, he actually there's a key to that family will have as long as they're there. But it actually has a stable place for doing homework. And it just speaks volumes to what it means for a family to have a home. And we're pretty passionate. I know many of you share that passion. But we can see family after family, the stories are so extraordinary. We have already built since 2006, 21 homes between Silt and Rifle. Only 2 have turned over in that since 2006. So the families are not inclined to mobilize or leave. And yes, we'd like to see some mobility in the housing market in general, but given the prices in the rental market, this is such an extraordinary opportunity for a family, again, to be paying what's a fair amount for their home. Just lastly, we found it South Vista, especially with the net zero and the $14 a month utility bills. That's true affordability. And what we're able to see is those families are starting businesses and I guess I could spend more time, but I really appreciate your asking that question because I think there's a lot of data very specifically we can provide. And then lastly, as we did in Rifle, to entertain the opportunity for our older adults to be stabilized, as we have mentioned, that local, that regional housing study done that only 7% of older adults feel stable in their housing choices moving forward. We see a need there as well.
Any other questions? I have a question. So I'm looking at your AMI chart, table 2, and it looks like your average is 80% AMI, and kind of shows the kind of people that would qualify as teacher, median, registered nurse start. I mean, with like Walmart starting at $18 an hour, where do those people live? Is this truly affordable for everybody in our community?
And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that question. And unfortunately, don't we wish we could address the needs of everyone working in the dental office and Walmart and the coffee shop and the grocery store? Again, with such a large need, and we're intersecting this problem at that ownership, our target is 80% households. That is our target. So we're not looking at 70 to 120. That really is truly a target. And if we need to make some adjustments, but that household right now is most likely renting, most likely paying 2 to 3 times what will soon be their mortgage payment. And so we hope to be partners for a long time solving this broader question and really demonstrating the feasibility of building affordable homes.
So 80% is for those teachers. And it may not be for the entry-level people, but 80% AMI is absolutely teacher level housing.
And that's what we found at Basalt Vista for the Roaring Fork School District, just mentioning those homes are 70 to 100% AMI. And we not only have teachers, but we have administrative staff, we have custodial staff that are living in the homes with their families. And so for the district, this did address a broad need and an opportunity for them. And then of the 47 jobs, which we showed you the list before, what all the positions and people are working at City Market and et cetera in the Basalt community and picking time.
Great, thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Margo.
Thank you. Just a procedural question, and this could be for Hannah as well. At what point in this process, if this is awarded to you, do we talk about the details? At one point, do we iron out the qualifications and all that stuff?
So I would envision soon that we're going to have a charrette, but at the same time, let's identify your priorities. Let's identify what that deed restriction might look like if you want to align housing with certain jobs. And we have our preferences that we believe in forever homes. But if that's not economically or reasonably viable, but I think that having this conversation sooner and working through and identifying your priorities, this is what we really look forward to.
And that would also be the time when we decide on fee reduction and all that kind of stuff, once we have the details.
I think that I think there's two things kind of going on. I would envision us working through a development agreement that address those details. It's not going to address specific design because I think that's really more the charrette public hearing planning process, but getting a development agreement in place that it lays out your expectations as well as Habitat's probably would have the form of deed restriction attached to it as an exhibit, those kinds of details. And I would, if this moves forward, we'll start working on that right away.
Okay.
And I would hope to be back in front of you guys early June for a work session and or just going on a regular council agenda because we need to get that in place so they're comfortable and you're comfortable moving forward.
Right.
Time is of the essence on these things if we're going to go forward.
Understand. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, well, enough for public comment. Hooner, come on up. Just for the record, if you can recite your name as you want it to be recited into the record.
Ron Gillespie, 3901 Mountain Drive. Goodwood. Nigan's Habitat is doing a great job. I'm all for affordable housing. Thing that has me a little upset is you picked a piece of property back in 2005. The fathers of City of Goodwood thought it was wise to buy that piece of property and take it off the market so that you have a little bit of a cushion for Cowden, less congestion there at 8th and Midland, and any kind of right of way we may have needed in the future. This worries me because you're starting to have a presence of selling or using city property that's been set aside for right of way use or for eliminating traffic congestion. And we just got to talking about trying to do something about traffic congestion. Now you want to put 8 units right there on that corner. And that's not what that property was bought for. And that's what I just object to that particular location that you have picked. Because 8th Street right now functions fairly well. If you stick 8 units there on the corner, you're putting a lot of congestion there and the Cowden people, that whole area. I mean, it's say, but when those people come out of their homes and get on the Midland, it's like say a prayer and it's on there. Because, it's not easy for them to get to merge on the Midland. And if you're going to take some of this property that the city owns.
Hey, Don, just real quick as a point of interest, could you speak either closer or louder?
I can speak louder.
Well, let's hear it, brother.
I don't want to be shouting, but where does this stop? We bought all that property all the way from 23rd Street up to about 8th Street on the river for right-of-way use, or just to keep for the citizens in the future to have access to the river and enjoy it. So if you're going to do that with this piece of property, what council in the future may not do the same with this other property. So I just hate to see this particular piece of property be filled in with housing. That's it.
Thank you, Don. Mr. Vick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gary Vick, 614 Cowden. I've actually got some questions, maybe that the presenters might answer. And some of these may have been in some of the materials that I scanned, but just some general questions. Let me just kind of rattle them off, and then perhaps you could allow them to answer some of these. You mentioned at 8th and Cowden that these units were going to be owned and you would qualify initially, but there was no ongoing qualification requirement. So if the person sells the property, I'm assuming it's limited to appreciation, but is there a process for the subsequent buyer to come in then? Does he also have to qualify for certain types of income and so forth? I would say that, one of the reasons you want people to buy these properties is so that they do become long-term owners in the city, and they do get some appreciation and wealth buildup. And when our prices are going up 23% a year, I wonder if 3% is enough. I guess you're going to hammer out those details some point in the future. I do want to applaud the city for getting away from the old, just put it on the backs of the builder and then they stiff you and don't give you any affordable housing and you never learn and you do it again. So this is a step in the right direction. I also have a question about the sewer line that runs under that property. It's a pretty big one. And in our neighborhood, at least along the river, we're restricted by where we can build on our properties because of the easement. And I wonder if you're going to be building properties directly over this, or maybe this is a question we deal in the future, but I'd like to figure out what's going to happen with that. I have a question about the properties on Airport Road. I'm not exactly familiar with where those are. And Shelley's going to accuse me of a conspiracy theory here, but I'm not. I'm just asking a question. I'd hate for these to be built to a height to where the next time we do an airspace study, these properties intrude into the airspace. And then we are faced with the choice either to protect the airport or tear down these properties. So I'd like somebody to tell me that these will not interfere in any of the slanted planes, not planes with wings, but the planes that go out for airspace intrusion. I'd like to just confirm that. And you also mentioned that there would be public hearings on the 14 rental units. You didn't say anything about public hearings on Midland. And I think a number of us in the neighborhood would just like to have those hearings to see what's going on. So if you can answer some of those, that would be great.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Man, I love it. Thank you. Lori Chase, 705 Cowden Drive, which is about 50 feet away from 8th and Midland. And we just recently received a letter from the city that they will be enforcing parking, meaning you will not be able to park anywhere on Cowden, Overland, or Davis Drive. So I'm kind of wondering, when we add 8 more condos that will have to egress probably onto Cowden and putting it so close to that intersection, how that's going to work for all the residents in that area. It just doesn't sound feasible. Not that I'm against this housing. I think this is great. I would like to see how that's going to work with the traffic pattern there already. We're told that the reason why we can't park on the street is because it's a safety issue to allow fire and other emergency services. And also, if this does go through, I want enough parking on that property so we don't make the same mistake that happened on Davis Court or Davis Drive, whatever that is. And these people, they're being told to go down to an auxiliary parking lot if they need to park near their homes and they can't. That's kind of a stretch, I think. And I think that's about it right now.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Who's phone?
Is that Gary or Gary's phone?
Anybody else? Okay, I'll close public comment and bring it back for motion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. May I?
Did you want any answers to Mr. Vick's questions? A couple of them are super, I was just gonna say it's super easy on the navigation easement, is that you actually can't build in the navigation easement under FAR 77. So that's the answer. to
I'll
that.
be patient.
I think a couple of his questions were pretty easy and
Then the other one is the deed restriction that it does have a sales process. So that one's taken care of.
so that means that future owners would be vetted by Habitat, similar to the original.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and then, yeah, we're just gonna have to talk about what's the appropriate appreciation level.
Yeah.
I think we all have, I know I have feelings.
Yeah,
Not that mine
absolutely.
count, but I know I have feelings about appreciation.
But
So
that's not for
certainly-
tonight.
Yeah,
No.
really, Gary, you asked questions that I think all of us are asking, but I think right now where we're at in the decision is whether or not we want to move forward with the concept, and then we'll work on the details. But they're great questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marco.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to move that we award RFP 2022-01 to Habitat for Humanity, the Affordable Housing Project. This is action item number 1 for, let me get to there, parcel 21850930002.
Second.
Been moved by Counselor Dem, seconded by Counselor Stepp. Before we go any further, there was a public comment online. And it's Lee Bowles. And if you have a camera, Lee, we would ask you to put yourself on camera if you'd like to comment on this item. We normally don't reopen it, but I didn't see the hand. Okay. Never mind. Well, that solved itself. All right, the motion. By Counselor-
Charlie has a question.
Yes, we have comments on the motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll be real brief. I think I've read all this material. For those who were not familiar with this, we also had a meeting with our ad hoc housing group this morning. And one of the reasons I asked the question of Gail Schwartz about the benefits is, the benefits of affordable housing is providing stability. One of the things that really hit home for me and my caring of this is the fact that it really provides stability for young people, children of these families, to give them a stable home in which to live and be raised in. So I think this is a really important concept.
I can't hear you.
I am,
Yeah, I don't know what's the problem with the sound in
Right,
this case.
yeah.
We have a microphone for the public that you can't hear from. That's just like encapsulates the problem with this council.
and I
Don't even bother to listen to the people.
Go ahead. Please finish your thoughts, Council Wilman.
Thank you. And I apologize. I've never been known to be quiet, but I've been criticized several times in council meetings, and I tried to talk right in the microphone. So hopefully this is better. I apologize. So the point I was making, I'll just make it real quickly again, is that one of the big facets of this, and we had a meeting with our ad hoc group this morning, one of the big facets is stability for children and the families that they get from home ownership, which is what all these are. Gary raised a number of questions. Laura, you also did. I think those are all good questions. My understanding of parking, by the way, which we didn't talk about in the presentation made to us at the work session a couple of weeks ago, was the parking would all be on site, would not be on the street. And part of that development process and design process of charrettes, how do we get at ingress and egress? Because, there is traffic there. It's 8 units. It's not a lot of impact, but everything is impacting traffic in this community. And we fully understand that. So I'm in full support of this project. In fact, both these projects, because I think it's just a good start in this community to provide workforce, affordable housing, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to support this.
Thanks, Charlie. Anybody else have comments? I'll just, if we don't, I'll make the last comment. I just think that I think we have, thank you, Carl, for kind of clarifying that, and Councilor Dem, that tonight's, we're not negotiating some of these things. That helps me as well. I think we need to have that work session. I think a work session is probably where it makes more sense than on the dais. Because I also have some thoughts, and I will be supporting this tonight. Shock face, Hannah.
Not shocked at all.
Oh, come on. But I would hope that when we have this conversation, we can have it because, we are having a larger conversation in the community. We just had this great presentation today from our ad hoc housing committee, and we had some number of recommendations from them that I thought were really great. And so we're going to have to work through this concept the next couple of months about what affordable housing looks like in the community. And I guess I would just be hesitant to create two wildly different classes. So I guess I would just hope that as we have this conversation moving forward, that it can be as aligned with what we do with our larger community. And those are my comments. So since we have another comment, right, let's call the question.
Counselor Wusso, yes. Counselor Stepp, yes. Counselor Dem, yes. Mayor Godus, yes. Counselor Kaup, yes. Mayor Pro Tem, yes. Counselor Hershey, no.
Thank you,
It
Hannah.
passes 6-1. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you,
One
Gail.
more, Mr. Mayor, if I may, action 2.
Oh, yes.
I
Absolutely.
flipped them for you just in case.
Yeah, I'm used to this. I know. I would move to award RFP 2022-01 to Habitat for Humanity, the Affordable Housing Project. This is for action item 2, parcel number 218-527-2000003.
Second.
The move by Counselor Dame, seconded by Counselor Stepp. Okay, both of you. Counselor Kaup, I'll give this one to you. All right. Any other comments on this one?
I do. I just wanted to thank Habitat for being the only organization that submitted. And thank you so much for your reception to just working with us as a community, what you bring, the systems that you already have in place, the integrity of your organization. We're excited to work with you, and we really appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Real quickly, for those who you weren't here this morning and did maybe not look at a packet, I would encourage you to look at the packet from our work session this morning with our ad hoc group and the packet here. It really talks about this gap in funding and the benefits of this. I think it's a great educational tool. I learned a lot over the last couple of weeks about affordable housing. So encourage you all to look at that stuff. Thank you.
All right. And I guess I'll just make one comment in relation to Hooner, who's, I don't know if he's still here anymore, but, I just think as a council, just to answer his question, we can't speak for the intentions or the votes of a council 17 years ago about why that was acquired or whatever. We can't necessarily speak to the intentions of a council 20 years from now on a hypothetical piece of property. So, we just have to make the decisions that are in front of us right now with what we have. And so that's, if he was here, that's what I would say to him. And if he's watching, that's what I hope he gets out of it. So if he wants to talk to me any further about it, he knows where I live. Ryan, let's call the question.
No, Counselor Hershey. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Willman. Yes, Counselor Kaup. Yes, Mayor Godus. Yes, Counselor Dem. Yes, Counselor Stepp. Yes, Counselor Russo. It passes 6-1.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, we are now on to electric rate increase pro forma.
Can we take a brief break?
Sure. Let's come back at 7:42 sharp.
Thank you.
financial trailer after that based on CPI or inflation or something of aspects, or a 5.2% increase this year, and then another 5.2% increase that next year, and then the same kind of financial trailer there on and out is what the staff is asking for. Staff is recommending the 5.2%, and we'll kind of go through the why of that. But I thought I would kind of step through the process a little bit since we're so early. I'll get going. Okay. No. See if I can get this. What I have in front of you, and I'll go through these slides really quick. There's about 12 of them or so, and I'll go through them pretty quick. What this is in front of you is an average house in the city of Glenwood Springs. The average home in Glenwood Springs is about 631 kilowatt hours. The house that's on the chart right there is actually my house. For the last 12 months, I use 566.75 kilowatt hours. I have a 2-bedroom home, 4 people, garage, swamp cooler, everything you would normally have in a home. So I feel that 600 is a number that I actually use to kind of show you what the price is. So your average monthly bill is 600 kilowatt hours with our $11 administration fee, and the 10.66 cents per kilowatt hour is $74.96. If you increase that, because this is all about numbers, and we want to talk about numbers. If you increase that 5.2% for the average home, you go up to $78.29, so about $3.50. If you increase that next year another 5.2%, you go up to $82.36. So the total change is about $7.40 to the average home payer in the city of Glenwood Springs. If you do that at 4.5%, then it saves you $1. So you're $6.38 after the second increase next year on your average bill. So it's not a huge differential between the two conversations. It's only 0.7% increase between the two. If you go through all of the CAMU charts that I had provided to you guys last time in hard copy, I'm going to go through those here in a minute real quick too. Glenwood's rank in the 53 communities for residential billings was 7th lowest. Small commercial 13th lowest, large commercial 24th lowest. We are below the 50% line on the CAMU surveys that they do every single year. And Mean does the same surveys, and we're well below the 50 percentile anyhow on all that they do. That's 69 more communities. If we change it 5.2%, next year we'll jump up to a whopping 14th lowest, 23rd and 31st lowest. So as you can see, it's not a huge change in the chart. And what the charts aren't showing you is all these other communities on the charts are also having the same conversation about what do we do about electric rates. So I doubt we'll actually even move when it comes to the survey itself. And just for a quick note, is the city includes its franchise fees that we pay, which are about $1 million a year, into our rates. Other communities do not do that. I'll kind of show you that here. We also don't have a sustainability renewable energy fee built into this either. That 10.66 cents is our fee that we build everything into. A lot of other municipalities and fees around the zone. So everybody's visual, and since this is a public conversation, I wanted to put these up here. I know it's kind of annoying. Here's Glenwood Springs on the residential chart. We are at bottom. It's same thing with small commercial. You can see Glenwood Springs once again at the bottom. Large commercial, we get close to the middle of the chart on the left-hand side, but there's a bunch of co-ops that are more expensive than us and investor-owned. And if you look at it in a visual aspect, I told you we move up a couple in every single one of these. Once again, residential with a 5.2% increase. We're still at the bottom. We're the half or lower on this thing. Half or lower in the green section over there is Glenwood Springs. And once again, half or lower on the chart is Glenwood Springs. That's with a 5.2% increase. And all of these communities are going to be looking at cost increases the next year or so too. So I doubt that we'll even make it that far. I gave you guys this chart also. We started raising rates in 1991. It was the easiest time to go back to look at. We raised rates again in we raised rates in 2007, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Those were really bad energy years. The city was moving on to going to mean, and there were some things going on, so the city had to increase costs. In 2015 was the last time we actually raised rates. In 2017, people would try to say we raised rates. We didn't actually. We used to give 100 kilowatt hours away for free, which is about a sixth of a bill. So we decided that wasn't probably the right thing to do. So instead of raising rates, we actually just we don't give 100 kilowatt hours away for free anymore. So from 1991 to 2015, we raised rates 36.43%, which is 1.52% average per year. If we add 5% in 2022, we'll have raised rates from 1991 to 2022, 41.63%, which is 1.34%. We have raised rates in 5 years. And if you add another 5% next year, on average over those 32 years, we've only raised rates 1.46%. The whole point of this chart is what generally is CPI? 1.5% to 2%, which is why we're asking for an increase this year and next year, but then thereafter, we're not asking for anything farther. The pro forma shows increases thereafter, but for a reason we'll talk about. We're just asking for CPI or some kind of financial after that. We can decide what that is. But if we had just raised rates, the point is if we just raised rates 1.5% every single year, we wouldn't have these 5, 10, 12% conversations, which is why we're doing that for water costs. The reason we have rates is we pay about 7 cents per kilowatt hour for transmission, FCRCs, bulk costs. We charge 10.66. We make about 3 cents on this whole entire deal every kilowatt hour we sell. But those things have to supply the funds for all of these things, not just operations and maintenance, but it's 3 substations, all the operations for those, a 4th substation being added as we're doing electrification over the next 10 years with cars and buildings and everything else. The grid has to grow. A wire that's this big then has to be replaced with a wire that's this big. So it's not just, hey, we can keep transmitting electricity across the same wires. They will melt. So we do have to upgrade them. We do sell 130 million kilowatt hours to rest 6,611 meters every single year. So we have a fairly decent sized grid. And fun things, 50 miles of overhead, 45 miles underground, 1,500 transformers, 1,200 electricals, 4 substations. We own a lot of things that we have to maintain, which is why in the pro forma, there's a decent capital budget line every single year. We still have to maintain things because some things are 40-year-old and some things are 1. So those 40-year-old things get replaced. Now they're 1-year-old, but this 1-year-old down is now 2. So you just have to keep replacing things along the way. So you have to have a pretty decent capital budget. This is just kind of a quick overview. About 90% of the people around us live in these 2 power systems. I won't say which one's which. And that's not the point of the cost. They're about the same cost as we are, as you saw from the CANU survey, but they build things on top of their rates that we don't even have. One community actually charges 2% on top of the entire bill just for renewable energy. All they do is take that money and put it towards renewable energy or whatever they're using it for, a green system. We don't do that. It's built into our rate. The other company charges 1% for renewables and 1% for Colorado Energies, and they also charge 3% franchise fee on their commercial businesses. We don't. Once again, it's built into the 10.66%. So we don't have any of these weird little extra costs. And I did the one on the right-hand side just for the fun of it, because that's how many line items are on every person's bill. And in the summer, it gets actually worse. There's 3 or 4 more line items associated with it. So trying to figure your bill out is just impossible. But if you look at Glenwood's bill, it's $11 and it's $10.66. It's nice and simple. We try to round everything into it. And then at this point, I wanted to know if you guys want to go over these pro formas again. If you look at the pro formas, it's really just money in, money out. If you look at 2022, the only difference between these 2 is in 2022 at 4.5%, we'd make $53,000. That's $15 million budget. We're going to make $53,000. If you do 5.2%, we make $113,000. And the only thing, that's the only difference between the 2 is how much money are we putting back in the bank? We like to keep around, as we talked about the cash reserve policy at the bottom, $5 to $6 million in the bank. We've been burning through some of that. That's partly my fault, because we have been trying to add these systems that we know are coming. The substation is going to cost us $2.5, almost $3 million. We knew that. It came out of cash reserves. That's why they're there. But I also know that there's a bus barn coming. I know that Glenwood Meadows is increasing in scale. The charging stations are going in, rapid charging stations. Rivian's here, and they're looking at stations. And those things equal 10 to 20 homes turning on at one time, one charging station. So we're just trying to plan ahead. We spent the money, but we need to replenish that money. So I guess I'll be quiet, let you guys ask questions, but staff is recommending we do 5.2% for this year, starting for the July bill, which actually will be billed in August. And once again, in January 1st, adding the other 5.2%. And then we could have conversations with staff, or we could have conversations as council about where we go after that. If you want it to be CPI or inflation, maybe not inflation since that's like 10% right now. But maybe a CPI or some kind of variable financial. So I was not even.
Charlie.
Yeah, Matt, I know our public is, well, I don't have anybody from the public left in the meeting but I think for the people who might be watching online and or might watch this video later, could you explain why the cash reserve policy, which what I understood when the first time I heard this presentation was so important? Would you talk about that just for a minute and how that ties into the rates you're talking about?
Sure. There's 5 or 6 parts to the cash reserve policy. I'll go through them very, very quickly. O&M expenses, and this is standard operating procedure for their communities, and actually kind of globally, this is a cash reserve policy that was put out there. That you should keep 25% of your operating expenses in cash. So if 2020 happens, people stop using electricity, you have enough money to get through a lull like that. And then gross utility plant in service is 1%, which basically what do we own? We own $49 million worth of stuff. By the end of this year, it'll be almost $60 million worth of stuff with the new building and the substation and everything else. They're saying you should keep 1% of your overall depreciation number, if that's what you want to call it, your ownership number, as a reasonable. It's a very small number. Deposits, we have to keep those because people give us deposits, we hold them. Debt services, we have to pay debt services. Current year capital improvements for borrowing, they suggest 20 or 30%. That's the difference between these two. That's it. This one says 20% for these two items, which is the current capital year projects and the 5-year capital projects, and one is 30%. That's the only difference. One's why a little bit higher than the other. And the reason for that is, once again, if I want to build a substation or I have reflows that all fail in the substation, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars immediately that need to be fixed. So we're trying to keep cash in for those capital improvements to be fixed, so that we don't have to go out and try to find a borrower for $500,000. We can just pay this. So cash reserve policy, if you take the total number, I think as a city, we kind of shoot for 30 or 35% of our revenues is our cash reserve policy. In essence, if you calculate this out, it's about 35%. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Matt, I'm thinking basically what everybody's dealing with inflation right now, would it work to delay this rate increase for 6 months? Still go to 5.2%? Does it have to be done in August just because of what everybody's dealing with right now with everything else going up? I just filled up my gas tank today and it was twice what it was 6 months ago.
No, I completely understand. We've kind of held off on this conversation for 3 years. We were going to do the same conversation when we were doing water. Then we saw water was as big a problem as it was. And we're like, I can't hit people with that big of an increase and then hit them with another increase at the same time. So I'm never sure that there's a great time to increase rates anyhow. Yes, inflation's a little bit higher right now. Cost of living, as you guys just had a conversation, it's ridiculous. But the funny part was when we raised rates for water, it was significant. And I appreciate you letting us do that. It's really helped out with the water department, sewer department. We put a whole bunch of money in funds to help people pay for things. 17 people applied for that money. So it wasn't as big of an effect. I was expecting a couple hundred people to apply for that money. So I understand inflation is not great, but also understand that we kind of live in a pretty decent community. And this isn't the end all be all for what your bill is going to be. This is just, hey, can we raise revenue 5.2%? Knowing that the average household 600 kilowatt hours, maybe we leave the rate increase a little bit smaller. It's kind of a decision we're all going to have to make, and maybe commercial takes a hit a little more. Or maybe we have, instead of $11 a charge for admin, it's $13, and then the rate doesn't change. There's so many ways to play with the dollar amounts that, yes, it's going to increase no matter what, but who it increases on will be a point of conversation.
And then my second question is, talking about 2 years from now, if we pass this and then we start looking at CPI, can you remind me or the public, if we have to pay for that Excel transmission line, we would be looking at more than CPI. Is that correct? And how much would we be looking at potentially?
So it's a combination of things that they've kind of built in that are conservative. They're saying that your wind rate's going to go up 3.5% every single year. That's just the power purchase. That's not transmission or O&M or anything. So it's 3.5%, but it's really only like a 1% hit to the actual dollar. it's only a portion of what we're buying. They're saying inflation's gonna be 3.5%. And then they're saying, we're putting in here that we're also saying that transmission rate fee will go from $1 million a year, and then in 2026 could be up to $2 million a year, which is a 10% fee on what we purchase. We buy about $10 million right now. It would be $11 million in 2026 if Excel actually goes through with this process and then everybody approves it. So that's why the 5.2% kind of keeps going for these 5 years. We don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know if their $1.7 billion project is $1.7 billion or 2 or 1 billion or whatever it is, or if it's actually partially financed by some of these developers that are going to come in and hook onto the thing. They're basically, as far as I'm concerned, kind of throwing a dart at the wall saying we need to increase transmission lines so that we can have renewable energies hooked to them. This is our best guess of what it's going to cost. I don't want to raise rates for the next 5 years at 5.2% with somebody's best guess on such a large risk or variable number. I'd rather just raise it what we know we need. Like I said, this year, for half of the year, if we raise it, we're only making $53,000. So if we don't raise it 5.2%, 4.5%, I'm sorry, we'll lose money.
Okay.
Probably do that. It's just coming out in cash at that point. So we're just subsidizing people's rates at that moment, which we did with water for many years, which wasn't actually very beneficial for enterprise fund. So that's why the 5.2% is kind of important this year, so we can at least break even.
Okay.
$53,000 at 4.5% breaking even as far as I'm concerned. Even at $113,000 in a $15 million fund, you're basically breaking even. So next year we'd like to make a little bit of money. That's why we're asking it to be there again, and it'll help cover the EOC that we just funded. Not that we can't, but it'll help cover that and still have more money for capital improvements instead of having to trail them off a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ingrid,
Oh,
and
I
then
did.
Tony.
Oh, really? I think Tony was
No,
first.
please,
Okay.
Ms. Bustamante.
Okay, a couple questions then. One is it possible, Deborah, what's the balance that I know we used either tobacco tax or marijuana tax to put some money that the 17 people used. What's available there?
I believe we use those remaining funds for the project out in South Midland for child safety.
Okay.
So I think
Okay.
we've already spent that.
Okay, I would love to maybe have a small amount available for people who could potentially be, hold on, Charlie, who could potentially be impacted by this, or similar, just that same concept. And otherwise, I guess what I'm hearing you say is if we do a 5.2 increase this year and a 5.2 increase at the end of the year, we will be in a position that we're good for quite some time. I guess where I'm at is, can we do like a reverse proclamation for the councils in 2015 and 17 who didn't continually increase this, because it's now fallen on us.
Sorry, a reverse proclamation.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, it's like where we say negative things about them instead of positive.
I think that
things.
violate our code of conduct.
Because it's unfortunate that it's fallen on this council to have to do both of these rate increases, but I do see the necessity of them. And I certainly, I think insulating ourselves so that we don't have that challenge is obviously what you're looking for from us. So if we had some funds, where else could we pull funds from?
I mean, there are reserves in the marijuana fund and the
Mhm.
tobacco tax fund. I would suggest if you guys do that, we don't run the same kind of program.
Okay.
What we did last time was we just funded the gap.
Yeah.
right? And this is like a $4 gap. No one is
Yeah.
gonna apply to get $4 a
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, okay, okay. And then can you just give me a little clarity then what you were not saying? Tell me what you think a healthy increase year over year would be. And are we missing any other utilities that we need to proactively start increasing as well? Is there anything else that I mean, obviously it's water, and what about sewer? Like, are we behind on that one too?
The water and sewer are combined in the conversation from
okay,
last year.
okay.
We were allowed to raise, council approved us to raise water and sewer this year 5% if we wanted to. We decided not to do that to see how the world was gonna go. And we'll have that conversation in July about, hey, do we need to raise rates for water? So next year, 5% or something less. We promised we would do all that research and bring it back to you, not just raise it.
Okay.
So yes, water and sewer are combined into that same conversation. Electric is the whole entire new thing. The reason I put up 32 years of information associated with this, if we just raise rates 1.5%, every single year, and or something close to that, we have to tie it to something, or we just say 1.5%. It will be much closer in 10 years than we would have been if we didn't do anything. But my intentions, as long as I'm in this position, is every 2 years, we're going to look at electric rates, whether we bring them to you or not. We're going to look at it. Every 2 years, probably every single year, we're going to look at water and sewer rates and say, hey, do we need to raise it 5%? Can it be CPI? Or are we just going to sit on what we have at this moment kind of thing? So we weren't really doing that because of COVID and the lag. We knew we needed to do all these things. You can't do them at the same time. It's unfortunate inflation is what it is right now. We're still having an increased conversation. I was happy it was only 10.4%, considering how much electric rates have gone up. Mean is buying power at 2 and 3 times more than they charge us. But they can also make power at a lower rate. So it kind of balances out over time. But Mean lost like $4 million this year because they had to buy power that they couldn't charge for. And we have cash reserves in Mean that helps pay for that. Just like we would have cash reserves here to help pay for things that are unknown associated. So I would suggest that I'm going to continue to look at these things every single year, but there's some kind of 1.5%, 2%, whatever you want to call it, financial increase or that we should do every year so that we don't have to have these 12, 15, 5% conversations every 3 to 5 years. Let's just do it every year.
Great. That was my question. And I really wanted you to reinforce it just like you did.
Councilor Hershey.
So you showed that cool chart with the middle things. What are we paying per kilowatt hour? I think you said that.
10.66 cents.
So that's pretty much below the Colorado average. And it's certainly below the average that most communities pay.
Denver's anywhere between 13 and 17 cents a kilowatt hour, so we pay significantly less than a lot of communities.
And I think Colorado's rates, if you go state by state, is right in the middle too.
Yes.
So we're below the middle of the middle, is what you're saying.
We're below the middle of the middle.
Okay, thank you.
I'd love to charge what Denver does, even at 13.75, but I don't want to lose money.
Go ahead, Shelley.
I think the difference with Denver is a lot of their utility is a for-profit company.
Yes.
And we're a municipal electricity, so we're not out to make a profit.
Which is why we're just making enough to put cash back in and survive.
Right, and thank you for bringing this to us, because I do think it's really important to understand that it's an enterprise fund and that it should support itself. So, but not at making a profit, but kind of serving the public, serving our city and all of our rates, all of our payers, and but making it function. And so it's important, I think, to bring this rate increase forward. It's unfortunate that we haven't raised rates since 2015, but even though now, even for 2022 and 2023, it's not a huge significant rate increase like it was for the water. So I can't support taking funds from another source.
We're still in the question phase.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so getting to my question. We have talked before about progressive rates, about structuring rates to try to encourage more efficiency.
Yeah,
See,
we
I just rolled into that. And yet it usually comes back to us as just kind of a straight rate increase. And we still have I still have the question too about, everybody, including, say, the senior couple that's on a fixed income, pays $11 a month for their service fee, the same as large corporations in town. So how, to me, there's an equity difference there. So, and we haven't ever addressed that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you kind of go to the next conversation once we get this conversation over. But I would agree with you. The companies that I put up in the last slide, basically, they have a service charge for residential and they have a service charge for commercial.
Right.
Because they're a much larger draw, they're a much larger user. The wires have to be this size, not this size, because of them kind of thing. So when we bring back an actual rate setting kind of conversation, we'll bring 2 or 3 options. Hey, just leave it alone and raise it by 0.2%. Okay, we'll go to $11.70.
Okay.
Or we can do a time of day. I think Holy Cross does a time of day. So off peak is actually pretty cheap, 7.5 cents or something like that. But on peak, it's like 21.
Okay.
double our rates.
Right,
You know,
right.
California sometimes goes on peaks for 40 cents, you know, so you gotta be careful. And anytime we can lower our peak, which is why people do that, it saves us on our FCRC costs that we get charged underneath.
Right,
Which
right.
is our demand fee, you know, we charge demand fees, they charge us.
Which gets us into battery storage and all that kind of stuff. So when will that come back?
That conversation, we have to approve this conversation.
Hey, I'm with you. You're asking big questions here.
The answer to that is June.
June, great, that's perfect. Okay. Okay.
Negotiate with Deborah on
All
whether
right,
it's a
I'm
work
done with my
session.
comments slash questions.
Matt, can you get us off a carbon-based electric grid and just now?
We did that.
When?
We did.
We're already winning.
I know. Just teeing you up, man.
Yay.
Any other questions?
We have a lot of other conversations going.
Thank you.
I have one last question.
Yes.
How many, does your house use the hours?
566.75 kilowatt hours a month on average.
Okay, I just wanted to compare for my own.
And-
Just was curious. Thank you.
And Matt,
Yeah.
do you think that that's,
I'm less.
I mean, is that typical? I know that's your house, but do you feel like your use is typical?
So on the in-town residential, it's 641 kilowatt hours
Okay.
across all of our meters is the average.
Gotcha.
Rural is 727 or something like that. People who are not, they're outside a little bit, up at 4 miles, those kinds of things, they use a little more power. But 631 is our average.
Okay.
So we'll base some of these rate conversations around that number because that's what people do. Excel uses 500. They charge a certain amount up to 500, and then once you go over that, it's tier number 2. And you can charge more, just like we do for water. And then there's tier number 3, those kinds of things. So that's a rate setting possible conversation. Also, to try to say, hey, you're a bigger user, you're going to pay for that next tier up.
All right, we'll turn this over for public comment. Any public comment, either in the room or online? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make just comment about Ingrid, you know, the reason that we created that fund, but we had the River Center was helping us and it was just really complicated. That was why I was gonna comment when you started talking about it earlier. I don't think the rate, it's big enough here to do that. I don't, it's just not. So with that, I will move that we approve the staff recommendation approving electric rate increase of 5.2%, both in 2022 and 2023, followed by yearly rate review with inflationary increases or higher adjustments as needed at the time.
Been moved by Council Wilman, seconded by Council Cup. Any more discussion? I think I'll just, if there's not, I'll say real quick, I think the public, I really want to reemphasize, and when I say reemphasize, I would really like Ike to report this, that we have not had a rate increase for 7 years. That's all I have to say. Ryan, let's call the question.
Where are you going? Oh. Can I just go?
Counselor Wusso, yes. Counselor Stepp, yes. Counselor Dem, yes. Mayor Godus, yes. Counselor Kaup, yes. Mayor Pro Tem, yes. Counselor Hershey, no. Passes 6-1.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Mr. Mayor.
All right.
For the record, Mr. Mayor, for the record, Mr. Willman has recused himself from item number 16.
Great, thank you. All right, next up is Downtown Market. And we've had some complaints that from that mic, it's not, I'm not complaining on you or anything. I give you some feedback that it's not very loud and people can't hear it. So if you could speak in your outside voice or closer or both. Yes.
Everyone's injured.
Yeah, together we make about a whole person, so it qualifies. And you'll have to forgive us, I just found out about this meeting yesterday afternoon, so I don't feel terribly prepared for this. But we'll do our best and certainly here for any questions that you guys have, and we'll answer as well as we can.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course, thank you. Hi, I'm Julia Smith. Yes, I just changed my last name, so I have to prevent it from being Larson.
And then for the record, give us your address as well, please.
Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
it's The market address, to be clear, or my personal address? Got it. 1142 Sun King Drive, Lemon Springs. And this is Cindy,
Cindy Sabato, 319 Park Drive in Glenwood.
and we run the downtown market. We are the board. We were working on filling in our park permit back in March, and we filled in the original application and had some questions that Cindy was spearheading on that. And then we got an email back April 13th with the notice of a permit change, that the application form had changed, and with it the fees, which fees are likely to go up every year, right? We all have service agreements. And so with that, we had some additional questions that we got in contact with Karsten today, and actually have been able to kind of sort out and get a firm number. So today we know that if we were to include Bethel Plaza with our park rental fee, it would be $4,540. We're going to not use the Bethel Park section just because that's too much of an increase. I believe Charlie provided our budget to everybody today. And we had only budgeted $1,500 for park permits. So without Bethel Plaza, we're able to bring that rate down to $2,665, which is a little bit closer in that gap and not quite the same sticker shock. Again, our budget's $1,500. We can mingle some of it, but we're asking to see if you guys would help subsidize the difference. And know too that Charlie, the reason he had that abstain is he's helping us get our 501c3 reestablished. The market was a 501c3 with the federal. And then sometime way before I was a board member, we lost that status. And so we've been trying to get it in place. And every year we try and we get a new resource to ask questions, and then life happens and we lose the resource. So, but Charlie, I don't think is going anywhere. And he is going to help us get this fixed so that way we can go to FAB and go through the appropriate channels in the following years, which is certainly our goal, because we don't want to be in this situation.
Can I ask a quick question, Mr. Mayor?
Let's let them finish the presentation.
Well, I
first.
just was, okay.
Go ahead.
You're good.
I just want to be
I'm
clear
just
what
reading
you're,
this based on how, what we can do.
Cindy, I'm sorry. I've read this. I know Charlie has recused himself. I understand the issue with FAB and the nonprofit, but what exactly you're asking for, the sort of the shortfall here?
Yes, correct.
Which is
The
what?
difference of between the 1,500 budget, thank you, I did not make that clear. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
You're welcome.
The $2,665 application fee, the difference between that and our budget of 1,500. So it's a request of 1,165.
May I ask, this 2665 that the city wants from you is for how many weeks?
15 weeks.
15 weeks.
Yep, 1-5.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I have two other mics here. I don't know which one was first. so
She was first.
Go ahead, Paul.
I'm just trying to understand where you said that you were not including Bethel Plaza because, no, I totally understand that. What I'm trying to figure out is when I go downtown to the market, you're along the street there, and that's where you'll be, is just on the street. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, correct. Last year, our setup included a musician in Bethel Plaza,
Okay.
which the restaurants really loved. Everybody sat out and enjoyed the plaza a lot more, had drinks and on all of that. But with that increase in fee, we're going to move the musicians. Right now, our current conversation is kind of by the elevators,
Uh-huh.
and then maybe scooch the vendors out a little bit so they're not just getting
Okay.
blasted. Is kind of how we're thinking we're going to manage that, and that way we don't have to get rid of them.
Okay. No, that's great. I was just trying to visualize it in my head. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, we had to do the same thing.
I'm gonna, unless somebody has a lot of other questions, I'm just gonna make a motion.
I do.
I was gonna.
You have questions? Okay, okay.
So you said that you were a 501c3. When was the last time you had a 501c3 status?
I'm working with the IRS to figure out when that was lost. But
Okay, do you know,
it's been a application, but before
so Cindy, you've been around for a while. You formed this in 1986. Can
No, we started in 2005.
2005, excuse me.
And we started on the market when
I've been a board member for 5 years, I think.
longer than that.
Longer than that?
So, but probably 8 or 10 years ago, somewhere it got misplaced.
And we are working actively to get it. It's essentially what I think happened is that something didn't get filed. Either it was the return or but we're working through that, and Charlie is again going to help us, and I feel very confident we're going to get that this year.
So Cindy, like, I think 5 years ago, we started on the FAB asking when you were applying for grants and for the Financial Advisory Board, for you to become a 501c3. So that's 5 years ago. Can you tell me why in the last 5 years you haven't gotten that status yet?
Yes, again, we've each year tried to reestablish it. The form is a lot more complicated if you previously held a status. You can't just go. I think if you're a brand new company, you can go online and you can probably figure it out within an hour or 2 hours. But if you've already had been established with an EIN as a 501c3, you cannot do the simple form. It's a much more complicated form. And not being a lawyer myself, I don't have all the answers. And so each year we've worked with a different lawyer to try to ask the questions to make sure we fill it in correctly, so we don't have to re-go through this or make things more complicated. We want to get it done right the first time. And each year, again, whoever has agreed to help us, there's just life events, things have happened, and we haven't been able to get the answers that we need. And so again, I'm very confident Charlie's not gonna leave us on this, or hopefully not have anything come up. But Gina's ability to help us with this, and we're really grateful for that help.
I asked yesterday for Deborah to forward on some questions to you of, do you have minutes of your last board meetings? Do you have any financial records at all? Are you the only two people on your, I mean, there's no treasurer, there's no secretary. Do you have any organization at all other than just two people?
Well, two people have been, yes, right now it's two people plus Vid helps us coordinate the music, but he would be a board member. He just helps us. Cindy is technically the president. I get to be the treasurer, secretary probably. That is how our board works right now.
And you have board meeting?
Board. I did not know that you needed that. Sorry, Hershey.
No.
I guess you have to, I just.
No, I appreciate, Mr. Mayor, your questions and I understand them, but I would like to make a motion.
Okay, I'm still not done with
Well, I
questions.
understand you're not done, but I'd like to make a motion.
Okay. Well, I think actually Ingrid had asked to make a motion first,
Okay,
so I'd like
great.
to honor that.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that for this calendar year, we give a $1,200 credit to the downtown market to cover the discrepancy between your budget and your costs. It'll be a 1-year opportunity, meaning that this will not be renewed, and that we would ask you that in future you get your 503C, or is it 503? 501c3 status, and apply for a FAB grant for any money that you guys need in the future. But that we do appreciate what you bring to the community. So that was my motion.
Second.
It's Tony.
And if you, Cindy, call me and I'll give you a check too.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So it's been motioned by Ingrid, seconded by Tony.
Yes.
Any other comments? I guess I have a problem, no offense, not with you people necessarily, but I think that using taxpayer funds on something that's not a nonprofit is really bad business. Excuse me, I'm had the floor right now. I think that, it's whether you were at one time or not, I would contemplate actually supporting this motion if you would include in it my fitness instructor, Sharma, who was given not a 5-year notice that they needed to become a nonprofit, but was given, like 60 days. And that was very contentious when she came before us and asked that we waive fees for her private enterprise. Because as of today, you might think you're a nonprofit, but if you don't have minutes of board meetings, if you don't have a board, if you don't have a 501c3, we are only giving public funds to private individuals with no accountability. And I'm not saying that you're misusing it, not saying you're commingling it, but by not being able to provide bank statements, by not being able to provide anything that shows a non-commingling of funds, I think we are doing a big disservice to our taxpayers, even just at $1,200. I think we opened the floodgates, I will encourage my Sharma and anybody else to come in and ask for similar considerations, because I think this opens up precedents that I don't think is good. I think there's been plenty of time for this situation to resolve. There's been plenty of communication, so I will be supporting the motion unless we want to add to that motion that we give anybody who's a for-profit or not a nonprofit entity 1 year of fee waivers.
Okay, I will not be amending my motion. And I will also ask, do you guys make a profit at all in running this?
No, I actually operated on a loss last year.
It was on a loss. Yeah, so.
We don't make a profit. We are happy to provide bank statements. I, again, am just kind of catching up with all
Yeah.
of these requests.
Yeah.
So we can provide anything that helps you guys
Mhm.
feel comfortable with this. And we do have nonprofit status with the state, which is public record. Secretary of State, I understand, is not a 501c3 with the federal government, and completely agree that that's a different
Yeah.
ball of wax.
I think we all just need to take a big deep breath and recognize that you do bring a benefit to the community. We appreciate what you do and we don't want to dilute that. And there may be some housekeeping that we can do and that we can support you through. But in this moment, there is a motion on the table to give you a $1,200 for the discrepancy. Hopefully it passes. I am optimistic. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming up and visiting with us.
Thank you guys for your
So,
time.
yep, let's go ahead and vote.
All right, let's call the
Wait,
question.
Wait,
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I gotta say something.
okay.
Well, I don't have to, but I want to. So I'm not 100% sure how you guys pay the fee. Is this on a weekly basis or is this a one-time check? So one time you paid up front and this is a done deal because I'm not sure I want to set the precedent of supporting this motion and give you the $1,200 off. But I'd be more inclined to put you on a weekly payment plan. And as soon as you have your 401 in place, we'll start wave 501, whatever it is.
$1,200.
Well, it's 12, it's the precedent. That's all I'm saying is I'd be more inclined
And your
to,
fly's undone, Tony.
to give you the weeks that you don't have your 501(c)(3), whatever the heck it's called. But as soon as you do have it, you apply for that FAB grant and you get your off.
But
So-
I think that FAB has a cutoff time. of when
Oh, this is already done?
No, they can, just for point of order, they can also examine, we had late grants and they do have the ability to examine things and we do refer things to them. Not all the time, but if there's like mock trial comes in, for example, and says,
Right.
hey, we need this, we will refer them to,
I'm
we'll either
just-
award it or we'll refer to.
I'm just concerned over the precedent, that's all.
Okay,
And I'm
well,
not sure.
I guess we can deal with the ramifications and see if there's enough support to pass the
Right,
vote.
absolutely,
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Let the floodgates open, right? Let's call the question. All right, thanks, guys. All right, agenda or anything from legal or?
No, I don't know if reading the vote into the record.
Oh.
Reading what into the record?
Yes, Counselor Hershey, Counselor Wilman's gone. Yes, Counselor Kaup. No, Mayor Godus, no, Mayor, Counselor Dem, yes, Counselor Stepp, yes, Counselor Russo, motion passes 4-2.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, city manager report.
Thank you.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Carl.
Congratulations, Ms. Larson.
Don't have anything tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Miss, not Mrs.
Yeah, hopefully by the time the market starts, we'll be almost almost 3 full people.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
All right. Do we need to not gavel out? We need to read this in?
Yeah, we need to have a motion to go into executive session. I would add to the end of that, we're going to, when we come out of the motion, if you want to, you can include that we're adjourning the meeting at the end of the executive session, so we don't have to come back.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I would make a motion to go into executive session. Just you have to say that thing first, Mr. Mayor.
No, just.
I move to go into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402 4D regarding specialized details of security arrangements or investigations, including defenses against terrorism, both domestic and foreign, and including where disclosure of the matters discussed might reveal information that could be used for the purpose of committing or avoiding prosecution for a violation of the law.
Is there a second? We moved by Counselor Hershey, second by Counselor Kaup.
May I throw something on point of order? Did you want to include to adjourn the meeting after the executive session, Tony?
Yes, I would like to include in that, thank you, Marco, that we end the meeting at the end of the executive session. And I want to thank the chief for his presence here and his security.
Okay.
And other comments.
All right, it's May 5th, 2022. The time is 8:30 PM. For the record, I'm presenting officer Mayor Jonathan Godus is presided by the open meetings law. This executive session is being recorded electronically. Also present in this executive session is the following persons.
Jonathan, quick vote.
To go into executive.
Oh,
You had a motion and a second, just no vote.
yeah, right on.
Don't get into the details.
And you're confusing me. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Do we have to read that vote?
No.
Okay.
And so we
So
still
confused.
have